When you build a website, you're supposed to check and make sure that the code is W3C valid. For the website to be ADA compliant, the code has to be W3C valid. Not only can you get sued, but you can also get fined. The ADA fines start at $75,000 and can go up to $150,000 for each violation. Now, this is the law. There is a law that says your website has to be ADA compliant. Yet, despite this, the UK did a study and they found that 97% of the government websites are not even ADA compliant. The 98% of websites fail accessibility guidelines. You've got tests in 2019. There was a study that showed that 98.1% of the home, or 97% of websites failed. 98.1% of home pages, and this is when they were checking 1 million websites. In 2024, they said that number had dropped to 95.9%. That's more than, when you say 90%, that's a huge number, but 95.9% of websites in 2024 failed ADA compliancy test. So when you look at this, and these are in 2005, a study found 97%. It's just one after the next. And to be ADA compliant, the website has to have W3C valid code. If you've got an error on the website, when you build a website, so let's see where you build a website as a web developer. The first thing you should do, you finish your website, and then you should check the code. You should validate the code. When you validate the code, you're making sure that you didn't forget to close a tag, to make sure that that everything that you're doing is up to the newest standards, because the coding standards are changing all the time. So if you went to school for coding and then you graduated in 2018, then 2019, you need to recheck your code to make sure everything is still valid and up to date, because the standards are constantly changing. If you take and you say, okay, the people attorneys, out of all of the people, and web developers, you can check web developers' websites. When 98% of the websites don't have valid code, that means that they're not even checking. That means a professional, if you're a professional writer, when you finish writing an article, you should check and make sure that you didn't forget to close a tag, misspell a word. You should check and make sure that your content that you've just written, before you present it to the person who's paid you to write the article, you should check it, spell check it, make sure that you didn't make a mistake somewhere. Yet, so to be a professional, you validate your code, you validate your content. Yet 98% of the websites that are designed and online right now, nobody's checked the code. I heard a guy telling a story about how they'd been working on this website for like 5 years, and they just constantly had problems. They couldn't get it to work. They were having problems in all these different browsers and stuff. And then one of the guys said, hey, why don't we check and validate the code? When they checked and validated the code, they found what problems that they've been having for 3 or 4 or 5 years. They've been paid by this company to work on this website and redesign it, and they didn't even validate the code. And then they come to find out that all these problems that they had been having could have been resolved had somebody just validated the code to see that, hey, you've forgotten to close the tag, you misused some coding somewhere. If you look at the websites, and this is going through, I haven't checked these, I just stuck them in the thing, but I know every one of them is going to be full of errors, because 98% of the websites online don't validate the code. These are attorney websites. 22 errors. This right here says there was a scan error. They couldn't even find it. This is checking 4 other things. So this is problems in the code. This is checking to make sure that it's ADA compliant. You've got 24 errors, 26 contrast errors. This is 1-800-LAW-1010. And the code's so bad that there's so many errors that they're error blocking validations. So they can't even validate the code because the code is so bad the tool won't even run on it. And if you look over here, they got 25 ADA compliancy error and 5 contrasting errors, in addition to it not being W3C valid. So to start with, it's got to be W3C valid, because one error, if you've got one error in the coding, that error can prevent the spiders from being able to spider the website. It can prevent a tool that's being used for a blind person or a disabled person from working correctly on your website because of these errors. And every one of these websites should have errors. This has got 23 errors. And it's got, in addition to those 23 errors, you've got 7 ADA errors and 47 contrasting errors. This is the Totally Legal, another website. If we look right here, this one has so many errors on the web page that it can't even check it. So the tool won't even check it to see the coding errors. But in addition to the coding errors, we've also got 3 errors for the ADA compliancy and 11 contrasting errors. This is onelaw.com. Pretty cool name, One Law. And although there's not one law, there's different laws. If you've got money, the laws are different than if you don't have money. But we've got 49 errors, 12 warnings. It lists out the errors. It shows you the errors and tells you how to fix them. I mean, all you've got to do is check your code. If you validate your code, you find out, hey, look, this code's full of errors. In addition to that, you've got 14 errors for the ADA compliancy and 27 errors for contrasting errors. So any one of these sites could be sued and fined for the errors. So you're talking about, you could end up paying $1 million in fines and lawsuits for a website that just wasn't coded correctly, because the guy who designed the website said, hey, look, as long as it looks good, the customer's not smart enough. As long as I develop it and make it look good, although this is things you shouldn't be doing. I mean, all this movement is bad for conversions. I mean, if the web developer, and a lot of these web developers will even put links to themselves in the footer, which is bleeding page rank and everything else. I mean, it's just bad code. In this one right here, how many errors we've got? 14 errors. One error. All you need is one error to make it not ADA compliant and make it where it could the search engines could not be able to spider it. So just one error is a problem. And then in addition to that, you've got the ADA compliance error, 2 errors and 70 contrasting errors. Any one of these websites can be sued for bad code here. This website is nothing here. This is nothing. There's not even an image on this page. Yet the coding is so bad when they didn't even do any images. We've got 4 links. I mean, out of everything, this website should be valid, but no, it's so full of errors they can't even check it. And it doesn't matter which website you check it. If we can find a link to the web developers, because like I said, a lot of the web developers, and there's so many links in the footer. Here's the law firm website here. This is the guy who does, and look how slow this website is. One of the other things, I mean, I guess it's not even going to come up. I guess that website's not even going to load. So let's see if we can go to just the home page. I mean, the web developer's website doesn't even work. You can't even get it to load. So there's no way for us to even check the code on that one, because Justia Law Firm doesn't even work. Look at that. So their website doesn't even come up. Maybe they've gone out of business for having such a crappy website. They went out of business. I mean, so they've got a link. Not only does this website have a link in the footer, but it's got a link to a bad website in the footer. So that website doesn't even exist. These links are linking to their social media pages, which is something you shouldn't do, because you're bleeding page rank back to the social media pages. But if you look, I mean, it's very sad that in 2024, web developers don't care enough about being ADA compliant that they will even take the time to code the website correctly. So 98% of the websites currently online, or what was that last test, 95.5 or something? The last study done, out of 1 million websites they checked, and this was like the top 1 million websites, they found 95.9 of them had problems had bad code on the homepage. It didn't validate. So 95% of the websites online, people are paying, and attorneys will pay upwards of $10,000 for a website. So you've got attorneys paying upwards of $10,000 for a website that have bad links to their web developers who have gone out of business apparently. And in service corporations, what is service corporation? But I mean, and maybe the web design and the attorney industry isn't as bad about linking. I know you go into the car industry, the people who build these dealership websites are the worst. They've got load times where they take 15, 20 seconds for the first content pane. The first content pane has to be under a second. It's just bad code. That's what it is. This is my website here. This is the Neymar.com website, and it doesn't have any bad code on it, but it's because we checked the code to make sure it validated. But if you look at all these other websites, none of their web developers check the code. They don't care. As long as it looks good, then the owner will pay for it. And like this does not make it accessible. When you have to click, look, I'm waiting. If I have a problem, first off, before I can even use the ADA compliancy, I have to click a link. That's the opposite of being ADA valid code. The fact that I have to click a link makes it not valid code. But in addition to that, every one of these websites have coding errors. And one error makes it not ADA compliant. It only takes one error and then it's not ADA compliant. And if it's not ADA compliant, you get fined. And even if it wasn't for being ADA compliant, if you're a professional and you say, hey, and a professional is somebody who's building a website for money. So if you're building a website for money, you should be a professional. And if you're a professional, you should do the courtesy to the person who's paying you of checking your code and making sure it validates. It's not something that the owner should have to say something about. I see all these website developers who will say, well, I can make the code validate, but I charge extra for that. Well, if you know how to make the code validate, you would just validate your code. It's like, hey, listen, I'll write you an article, but if you want the words spelled correctly and you want it to make sense, it's going to cost you more money. So, it's a crazy idea to think that to get the developer to design your website correctly, you have to pay extra for that. That's just crazy to me. W3C valid, that was set up to make sure that, to make sure the website is going to work correctly in all the browsers. Let's just take out the fact that it's not ADA compliant and you can get fined and put out of business. And you can get fined over and over again. You can get sued over and over again until you fix the code. So to say that you have to pay extra for something that will put you out, that's like going to the car lot and buying a car and they say, oh, wait a second now. If you want the car to run, you got to pay extra for that. We design cars and we sell them cheap, but we charge extra for the ones that run. Which they do, but most of the time if you buy a new car, it's going to run. So the fact that 98% of websites do not have valid code on them means that 98 or means that the majority, I guess I guess the ones that do have valid code are the ones that actually stood over the top of the web designer and said, hey, look, this thing has errors. And the web designer said, well, you got to pay me extra to fix that. And he said, okay, well, I'll pay you extra, but I don't want these errors in my website, because one error can prevent the search engines from being able to spider it. One error makes it not ADA compliant. One error can prevent it from working correctly in the browsers. The reason W3C valid code is important, the reason W3C was set up originally before they started the ADA compliancy stuff, but the original setup for being W3C valid was to make sure it worked in all the different browsers. But that's not what the web developers do today. What the web developers do today is they make sure it works good in the browser that the guy who's paying them is working in. And if somebody else works for the company and they say, hey, it's not working good in my computer, then they fix it on that computer. But they don't make sure that the code is coded correctly. The first step, if you're a web developer, if you're a writer, the first step should be making sure you didn't misspell anything, making sure that what you've written makes sense. So the first step in making sure that you have the website developed correctly before you ever show it to anybody should be making sure you've got valid code. If you're not making sure you've got valid code on the website, you are not a professional web developer. And since 98% of the websites currently online do not have valid W3C valid code, that means that none of these web developers who claim to be web developers, who are getting paid as web developers, aren't truly professional web developers because their code has errors in it. And somebody says, hey, what makes good code? If you're a web developer and somebody walks up to you and said, hey, what constitutes good code? What makes a good website? If somebody says, what makes a good website, the question should be, the correct question should be, a website that doesn't have any errors in it. Okay, well, how do you check to make sure a website doesn't have any errors in it? You validate the code. So it means if 98% of the websites don't have valid code, you're not a good web developer. You don't design, you do not develop good websites because your websites are full of coding errors. That's quite simple. Again, if somebody says what makes a good website, you have to say a website that doesn't have errors in it. You can say, oh, it looks good. Well, looks is in the eye of the beholder. Some people think one website looks good. Some people like white websites. Some people like dark websites. So the look, some people like images that look a certain way in the header. Some people like different types of images. Some people like different colors. The look of the website is in the eyes of the beholder. The only thing that makes a good website that's outside of the looks of the website is it doesn't have any errors and works correctly in any browser you put it into. Well, how do you test that? You validate the code. So a professional website developer validates the code and makes sure it works correctly and is error-free. If 98% of the websites are full of errors and have not got valid code, then that means that the majority of website developers, way over half, I mean way over 3/4, over 98% of website developers design poorly coded websites and are not professional website developers on any standard you put it on. So, and I'll debate that with anybody who wants to debate it, but I don't see how anybody would want to debate having bad code. So I would say it's not even a debatable topic. It's like saying you should spell check the content. If you're a professional writer, you should spell check the content, read it through it, and make sure you haven't made any mistakes in the content before you present it to the person who's paying you for the content. If you're a professional website developer, you should check and make sure there's no errors in the code and make sure that it's working correctly in every device before you show it to the guy who you built it for. And most of these people use these pre-made templates. They use WordPress or Wix or one of these other crap back-end platforms for their content management system, and they don't have a clue. They don't have the first clue how to make a website that's code-free. So they're not even professional website developers. There's something different than professional website developers because they don't make professional websites.